Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We've got Alex on mute behind me there, but we're getting ready to, as you saw in the thumbnail, put a disc brake kit on the Ford 9-inch that I just put in my 1967 GTO. So if you haven't been following the channel, I built my own 9-inch from a Speedway axle housing, cut off a bunch of brackets from this, old BOP rear end that I had lying around, and made my own, weld up some brackets. Anyway, we've got Trick Performance, upper and lower control arms in this thing. We've got 35 spline axles in this rear end, and we're going to jump into what all do we get in this cheap Speedway disc brake kit, and then show you what we got to do to make it work, because we're going to have to cut the rotors down a little bit, so they'll fit over the hub of the axle. Anyway, let's flip the camera out. Let's just jump right into the action. All right, guys, here's everything that we got in our Speedway kit. So now, these items did not come with the kit. I had to purchase them separately. So these are the brake hoses that attach to the calipers. And then here is a brake line that attaches the rear end, right? These two will attach to this and then feed up to the master cylinder. But we get in the kit all our brackets. Here's our brake shoes, or brake pads, I guess. Pair of calipers, and you can see they're labeled left and right. And we get a pair of rotors, as well as the instructions. And then we get a bunch of hardware here, as well, to mount the calipers and whatnot. So one of the problems that we have is this hub diameter is too small for the 9-inch, or I should say my axles. So we need to basically machine the rotors, here a little bigger so that they'll fit over the hub here on the rear end. So you'll notice these axles are actually, you have 4.5, 4 3/4, and 5-inch bolt patterns on these axles. These are PEM axles from Speedway. And then these rotors are 4.5-inch and 4 3/4 bolt patterns. So we have dual bolt patterns depending on what rim you're going to run. So let me go ahead and first things first, let's chuck these in to my lathe and open these up just a little bit. The other thing, guys, I just realized is I need to drill out these bolt holes, the 4 3/4 bolt pattern, for 1/2-inch wheel studs. So let me drill those out first, and then we'll slip this over, and I'll show you what I mean about how it doesn't slip over top of the hub here, and then we'll machine a little bit off. Guys, Unibit to the rescue. So I was able to drill them out with the Unibit real fast and cut through the metal real nice and easy. And now you can see, right, how I need to remove a little bit of this material, on a lathe, so that we can open it up just a little bit. All right, guys, so this is how I've got it rigged up, and I'm not too worried about just a little run out, because basically I'm just trying to open this hole up. So we've got it mounted up there. Not the best in the world, so we're going to be very careful when we do it. We've already made a few passes. Now I need to make a few more passes and open it up just a little bit more. And there's kind of the first step, right? We've got our bigger studs drilled out, so now we fit over our 1/2-inch studs versus our 7/16 GM style stud. And we've got the center, cut out a little bit now, so now she fits over the hub. And so now we can kind of start figuring out the brake kit. So let me go ahead and finish up the other rotor, and then we'll figure out, how we're going to attach this brake kit, spacers, and all that fun stuff. So one of the other things I'll tell you guys is not to use the factory T-bolts, because they are just not long enough. As you can see, this is about 1/4 inch longer than the factory style. So this is from another rear end I have. I'm just showing you for comparison purposes. So we'll need to use the longer ones that we received with the kit, that we received with the axle housing. The kit does not include these, so these would be a separate item you would need to purchase. Now, one thing that wasn't clear to me, guys, was the order of all this. And actually, this thin one here goes on first, okay, up against the axle flange. Then you put on this bracket, right, your caliper bracket, and then you put on this bracket, right, to tighten it all up. So, just to give you an idea, because if you don't use the little shim in the back, and if you just put this on and then you put the little one on out here, you're gonna have a gap of this amount. So this bracket then will not touch, you know, the axle housing. It'll just be up against the seal, okay? So it's important that you put the thin one in first, then put your caliper bracket on, and then put your outer bracket, and then tighten it all up real good. Now we can go on and do our caliper, and I'll show you how I assembled that, and then we'll put the rotor back on and check our gap to see what we have and what shims we need to use. All right guys, so I've got the caliper mocked up. So you can see I've got the caliper bracket mounted with the applied hardware. Now I don't have these greased or lubed or anything at this point for just for temporary fit up. This pad is secured. So basically I took and we used this pad for comparison. I bent these, okay, inward towards this direction so we have a nice tight fit when we put it on the caliper. And then I just used a piece of scrap metal, you know, pliers here, and just made sure I compressed it all the way. I didn't press, you know, the pliers directly on the brake pad material. Basically, I took this in here and then, you know, tightened it up. Now, the one thing I'm curious of is every caliper I've ever done always has a, I'll say not a shim, but something that clamps onto the caliper pad, and then when you snap it into the piston, inside of the piston there. Apparently, we don't get those with the Speedway kits, so I'll have to, I guess, go out and buy a set of those, you know, stainless steel adapters. Like I said, that snaps onto the pad, and then you snap it into the piston to help keep it kind of in place. So anyway, for the time being, we'll go ahead and figure out what we need for spacers here. Apparently there's different thicknesses in these spacers, and do I need to use 1 or 2 spacers? The idea is we want to have the rotor you know, centered between the 2 pads. So for example, if there is a 1/16 of an inch on this side, there should be a 1/16 of an inch gap on this side. And we'll use these spacers to dictate, you know, to get that maximum clearance on both sides. And then we can, you know, put all this in permanently and tighten the, actually I think they have us take this bracket off next and then bolt it on using the hardware, and then we can put the caliper back on. But I'll have to go, like I said, and find out about this clip. One thing I just noticed, guys, at least we're getting grade 8 hardware. So that's always a nice bonus versus some of the inexpensive fasteners that you get with some kits. So it's nice that you get, you know, the good hardware. And here's what I'm talking about, the 2 different spacer sizes. Okay, so, you know, when I watched the Speedway video, basically it looks like my 9-inch used like 2 of these big thick ones. So that's what we're gonna start with to see if that is truly the case or not. So, now guys, this is the left side. I forgot to kind of video what all the bracket looks like assembled. On the right hand side, which, you know, I was showing you first. But make sure, you know, you follow the directions, and bolt head is on the inside here, or I'm sorry, on the outside, and then, you know, you thread the nut on from the inside, because if you don't, learn from my mistake that the bolt is too long and it actually hit the back of the rotor. So make sure you put the bolts in the proper orientation. So guys, here's that clip I'm talking about that was either, they do not include in the kit, or if they did, I was missing. So basically you know, you anchor it into the hole, flip it up over top onto the pad there, and as you can see, when you slide it in, okay, it holds it into the caliper piston. Now, I had to buy the entire hardware kit, all this stuff, which I don't need, because, you know, normally these would slide into here, okay, but what happens is you're screwing this into the bracket, and then this part is actually going into here. You're not using this, okay? So, and you got extra O-rings, so the O-rings that go here and here now. So I've got those. But yeah, that's that clip I was talking about earlier that either I was missing or you have to buy it, you know, separate. I'm not sure. But anyway, now that we've got that, we can bolt the caliper on for good. Now, one thing before I bolt the calipers on, guys, is I use a little bit of this to pre-lube the O-rings on all the calipers, right? So those 4 spots, so that way the caliper pin, you know, will have something to slide up against. So that way it doesn't, you know, kind of get stuck in there, season there. Even though it is an O-ring, we'll just put a little lube on it, on the O-rings, and just a little lube on the pin as we bolt it in. All right, guys, so here's the finished product, at least on the driver's side, or passenger side, sorry. So we went with 2 shims, as you saw a few minutes ago. And then this is actually the spacer itself, or the bracket, sorry. These are the 2 spacers. So we've got those all bolted in. You know, we've got the brake pad in now with that clip that was missing earlier. The one thing I will say, guys, is, you know, I kept knocking these O-rings out. So what I did is I took another pin, and I'll probably have to use a bolt, but I kind of pushed it in to hold the O-ring in place. And then as I slowly tighten this one in, you know, and I lubed it up real good, right, then it just kind of pushed through with no problem, and the O-ring didn't pop out. So I kept having problems with these outer O-rings getting knocked out. So anyway, that's what it takes to install this caliper kit. It's actually pretty straightforward once you know, I had all the parts to put it together. All right, guys, so that kind of wraps it up. It actually was pretty simple kit to do. Wasn't too bad. Once I figured out what spacers went where and then put the bolts in the right direction, you know, it went together pretty easy. So I'm pretty happy with the kit. You know, I had to drill the rotors out for my 1/2-inch wheel studs for the GM bolt pattern. Like I said, figuring out the order of spacers, and then putting the bolts in the correct direction so they didn't hit the back of the rotor. That was just an error on my part. So next thing to do is, it'll be a future video, is to plumb the brakes. I'm probably going to build a transmission for this next, so then I can do the cross member. And then once I get that done, I need to get the steering column in, and then I can start figuring out brake lines and, you know, fuel system in the car. So this is, right, my 1967 GTO drag and drive car. You can see it's got the roll cage in here. It's got an LS powered engine. So if you've watched the rear end build, right, I built the rear end housing for this, built the 3rd member for it, and now we put the disc brakes on. Like I said, I think I'm going to build the transmission next, and then we'll work around a few of the other things under the car. And then when it warms up, we'll start, you know, getting back on some of the body work that we need to do. Anyway, we're getting there. We're making good progress. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. We will see you on a future upload, I hope. So stick around and enjoy the journey and the ride. We'll see you in a future.